he acts like big basketball is paying people to pick Michael Jordan. That's the best way. That is literally what Tug thinks in his head, right? He thinks there's like an agenda out there with big basketball to like they came by my house the other day and they're like, hey, you're in NB Sports. Hey man, here's $50. Make a Jordan video. Say he's the GOAT. And I looked around and I was like, oh, I gotta make sure Tug's not watching, right? And I took the $50 and I was like, all right, let me go pump out a Michael Jordan video and find a way to make him the GOAT. Oh my god, this is so stupid. I'm losing brain cells. Oh my god. Larry Bird and Bobby Knight don't agree on which is better, Lions or Tigers. So therefore, you can't take their opinion on Michael Jordan seriously.
Deep in the heart of Texas.
We're in the business of winning.
Don't bet against me.
I don't bet anyway.
Don't lose your life.
All right, everybody. After our debate last night, I was doing some editing, and who do I see but our old friend Tug doing some live streaming, right? And he's actually taking callers this time, which is surprising because he hasn't done that in a few months after the absolute beatdown that I gave him. So I guess he's come out of hiding to take some callers. So one guy calls in, and he starts off good, and to be honest, I can't listen to more than 15 minutes of Tug, right? It's just so low IQ, bottom of the barrel. All he does is deflect. He brings up tons of topics that don't matter. He just others Michael Jordan fans. He's paranoid. He won't actually address the issues and have a constructive back and forth, right? So anyways, this guy starts off saying, if you make the statement that Jordan is not the number one NBA or basketball player of all time, correct, then you're essentially admitting or acknowledging that there is a number one player to be had. And of course, Tug doesn't know what a declarative statement is or a definitive statement, right? A declarative statement essentially is something that is like a 1 or a 1-0, right, in terms of processing, right? It either is or it isn't. It's a form of a statement that essentially provides a conclusion to something, right? So if you're going to provide a conclusion such as Michael Jordan is not the number one NBA player of all time, right? The other side of that is that someone else then is the number one player of all time, right? You're providing a declarative statement that the number one player is out there. It exists in some form or fashion, and that Michael Jordan just isn't it. But that means someone else has to be. Again, I digress. Tug doesn't understand this stuff. It's just it's elementary English, right? He doesn't understand it, which is fine. And so he starts going off on tangents about he thinks the guy's trolling him, right? He can't just address what the guy says. And they literally, I don't know, I stopped tuning, but I'm sure they talked to forever about nothing, right? But during that time, I heard him bring up as an example as to, and he does this a lot, as to why Jordan fans are so bad, right? Or why they're the worst. He always brings up this poll in terms, or poll or a ranking, however you want to put it, of how ESPN said that Michael Jordan was the greatest college basketball player of all time.
They've done polling on this. They've polled people, who's the number one NBA player of all time? Who's the number one college player of all time? Who's the number one athlete of the entire 20th century and so on? Guess who wins? It ain't Jerry West.
Dude, that
Michael
college
Jordan.
poll he's referencing was a Twitter poll. It was literally a Twitter poll.
That these are their
a bunch of randos.
But see, let's
no serious writer or anything thinks that Michael Jordan was the greatest college player ever. There's plenty of them where they rank like the top 50 and Jordan's not even on it.
That's why with all polling, you don't cherry pick the polls. You go by a large sample size over years.
And he's referencing one Twitter poll.
There's a good reason to cherry pick and go by a smaller sample size.
And again, this is just an example of how disingenuous, dishonest, and he simply is just such a weasel, and he lies through his teeth about stuff. So this was not an ESPN written article, right? This was a Twitter poll, right? A Twitter poll. And the final battle between Michael Jordan and Larry Bird barely had over 37,000 votes, okay? that more than likely, I'm guessing that was the most voted on in terms of like the whole bracket that they had, right? Any other singular matchup, I'm going to guess that one had the most votes. 37,000 votes is a drop in the bucket of NBA fans. Further, whenever he also brought this up, the caller mentioned how, and Tug and this caller agreed that most NBA fans or most basketball fans are probably Michael Jordan fans, right? They both agreed to this, right? So we're using sort of 37,000 people, right? And in terms of this is what he uses to draw a conclusion on of like all of Michael Jordan fans, right? This is a drop in the bucket, correct? Now, what I did is I went through and I was, again, ESPN didn't write this. This was just on Twitter, casuals, Gen Zers, millennials, right? Whatever. So I decided, well, I'll go through and I'll see if I can't find if this is duplicated or replicated anywhere. Oh, and where I was going with that also is they voted Shaquille O'Neal in, right, over Lou Alcindor or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Right, that's actually probably even more of a upset or a travesty than Michael Jordan winning, right? Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is probably the greatest college basketball player of all time. At least is like top 5 or 10, right? Does Tug call out all the Shaquille O'Neal fans, the Shaquille stans, right? Like, no, he's just gonna call out Jordan fans, right? And this just goes to show how hypocritical he is. He cherry picks all of this stuff, right? So I thought I'd go through and I would see if I could find any other poll that puts Michael Jordan maybe even in the top 10. And ladies and gentlemen, there's not another poll out there that even has him in the top 10. In fact, I found a few that don't even have him in the top 20. I found another one that doesn't even have him in the top 50, right? And so during this sort of back and forth, Tug kind of, the one guy kind of brought up, well, that's just one poll, right? And Tug essentially dismissed it because, if you can find 20 polls that go against that one poll, right, it doesn't count because he's just going to laser focus in on this one because it aligns with his beliefs, right? Confirmation bias, right? So ESPN puts out a Twitter poll. Barely gets over 37,000 votes on the final poll, meaning not that many people really even voted or interacted with it, right? So he ends up winning the poll, right? And if you go on Twitter and you read people's replies, people don't agree with it, right? And again, if most basketball fans are Jordan fans, that means a lot of these guys think that Jordan is the greatest player ever, and they disagree. They all disagree that Jordan is not the number one player of all time. And again, like, was the poll clear in terms of like, it's just simply what they did in college? Did people think like, oh, well, who would I want to draft out of college? Like, who knows what people might have thought, right? And is there bias in it? Sure, but there's bias in anything. But yet he only penalizes Michael Jordan fans for having a bias, right? Like, I think my favorite player is Dirk, right? Do I get penalized for the bias of being a Mavs fan and Dirk being my favorite player? Oh, no, he would explain why, oh, well, that's okay, right? Because it's really only Jordan fans who aren't allowed to do that. So that part was dumb. But anyways, I thought I'd go around and see if I could find any other poll, right? Again, fans could not believe that Michael Jordan won ESPN's GOAT college basketball player bracket. Again, most fans are Michael Jordan fans, right? So there's a lot of Michael Jordan fans out there who don't agree that Michael Jordan is the greatest college player of all time. This is one on innerbasket.net. They have, where is he? They got Michael Jordan at 17. Here's one by Clutch Points. They have Michael Jordan at 18. Here's one by Yardbarker. Michael Jordan's 24. Here's one by Grantland. He doesn't even make the top 50. And then Bleacher Report has him at 12, right? So there isn't a single other poll out there or actually established people writing articles that have Jordan as the top 10, right? There's not a single one. I couldn't find another one. I searched for maybe like 20 minutes, okay? So I just wanted to, let's just put that to bed. Anytime you guys hear Tug bring up this ESPN college basketball example, you should just ram it right back down his throat and call him out for being an absolute liar and a disingenuous weasel. But also, he also mentioned this, which is just another stupid ass video, right? It's so funny. His videos are so boring, bro. They always bring up. This is another one about polling. Again, it's sort of like related to the college basketball one, right? It's about polling and how apparently Michael Jordan fans only bring up particular people that think he's the GOAT or what have you, or said that he was the GOAT. And so we're just gonna watch this for a little bit, and I have a video to respond to him with, right?
Hello, everyone. Now, as you know, Michael Jordan
I have
fans
it on
are the
1.5
worst
speed.
sports fans of all time. And one of the many reasons why is because these people are always saying that Bob Knight, Larry Bird, Jerry West, and Magic Johnson picked Michael Jordan as the #1 NBA player of all time. And then they act like that proves that Michael Jordan is the #1 NBA player of all time. No other group of
This is another example of how Tug doesn't really understand the 1-0 binary of things, how he presents things as like these all-encompassing totalitarian, black and white examples when it suits him, but then he plays dumb and doesn't get it whenever he does it. So like whenever he says Michael Jordan is not the #1 NBA fan or NBA player of all time or basketball player of all time, and you tell him that that's a declarative 1-0 statement, and how to say that means that there is a greatest player ever out there, right? And he plays dumb and he's like, "Well, that's not what it means, right? I'm not making a declarative statement, right?" But then he'll turn around in something like this and he'll use that same exact thing against you in terms of, "Oh, well, these 4 guys said that Michael Jordan is the greatest, so therefore it's a 1-0 in terms of Michael Jordan fans bringing this up as if that's it. Because these guys said so, it's a declarative statement that he's the greatest," right? This goes back to like the ring and the MVPs and the stats and all this other stuff that people bring up in his debates. It is not one thing. It is not one thing in terms of why people think MJ is the greatest. And I brought this up in our debate. It is a litany of things. It is a whole multitude of statistics, of data sets, achievements, awards, his peak, all of the things that he did, right? It is a culmination of his career and his resume that people are presenting in terms of why he's the best. It is not just the 6 rings. It is not just going 6-0 in the finals. It is not just the NBA Finals MVP award. It's not just MVPs. It's not just all NBAs. It's not just his points per game in the playoffs and the regular season, right? It is everything, right? It's his whole career. And this is where, again, he's being dishonest, and he thinks that because you bring up one point that we're just going to hang our hat on that one thing. And that one thing is like a silver bullet as to why Michael Jordan is the greatest. No, it's his entire career. It's all of his achievements, right? No one would make the argument that like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is the greatest just because he has 6 MVPs, right? They would also bring up his all-time scoring record before LeBron broke it. They would bring up his championships, right? They would bring up his rebounds, his blocks, right? They would bring up an entire litany of things in terms of why they thought Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was the greatest. Does that make Jabbar fans crazy? Are they crazy, right? Are they off their rocker because they bring up certain things about his career? No. And this is where I'm going to go with my reply video to this, right? It is not just because these guys said he's the greatest that people just go, "Well, that's it. I wash my hands of this debate and argument, and this proves that Michael Jordan's the greatest because these 4 guys said so," right? There are more than anyone, right? It doesn't matter if Michael Jordan doesn't agree. It doesn't matter if this guy doesn't agree. It is what we as a community as a whole in basketball fans think, right? And whether it be guys who played, whether it be writers, whether it be fans, whether it be the lowest of the low in terms of absolute casuals who just know nothing about basketball, but they still think MJ is the greatest, right? There are more people who pick MJ than anyone else, right? We could go to the bottom of the barrel or we could go up to the top. More people think MJ is the GOAT than anyone else, and I'm going to get into that here in a little bit.
sports fans in the history of mankind does something like this. No other group of sports fans cherry picks some Hall of Famers in any sport and always tells people that those guys pick some guy as the number one player of all time in that sport, and then acts like that proves that that guy in that sport is the number one player.
Again, it's not just them. It's not just because this guy said it or that guy said it. It is to add to the data set. It is to add to the proof. It is to add to the resume, right? That there are tons of people, whether high up or low ranking or casuals, that pick Michael Jordan, right? And there are plenty of other people who bring up how someone else said this guy was the greatest if it was like their favorite player. And or if you like for my favorite player, Dirk Nowitzki, I don't really think I could find anyone who thinks Dirk is the greatest player ever. Maybe someone's got a quote out there or something like that, but besides it just being an absolute casual or a Dallas diehard, like, there's no one out there who really thinks Dirk is the greatest player of all time. So, first of all, you already have to sort of meet a bar, a standard, in terms of even being considered to be the greatest for people to say it, right? This is what I mean. Like, he's sort of using how great Jordan is, and he's trying to use it against him. Like, it's the weirdest mental gymnastics ever, right? Like, okay, that's fine. Then find me other people who said that someone else was the greatest, right? And let's compare, or let's... but he can't find those people.
Of all time. And then no other group of sports fans pick some Hall of Famers when it's not even 100% for sure that those Hall of Famers pick that guy. And then no other group of sports fans pick some guys, and then those sports fans are contradicting themselves. These aren't the only Hall of Famers that Michael Jordan fans bring up. They bring up others, but these are the main four guys they always bring up.
Now, so other people did say he's the greatest. Okay, well, all right. Thanks for admitting that at least.
Before we get into this, I want you to know that I made a separate video about why you shouldn't go by voting if you're going to rank players.
I just realized watching this video how he uses the ESPN polling or voting to hold it against Jordan. But then in this video, he says you can't use voting to decide why someone is or isn't the best. So again, Tug just talking out of both sides of his mouth and being completely dishonest and hypocritical and having double standards for Jordan.
So if you haven't played that video, you may want to play that video first before you play all of this video. I made a lot of points in that video that I'm not going to make in this video. And I also want you to know that I also made another separate video about how all the NBA Hall of Famers don't pick Michael Jordan.
Also, one thing I find, okay, just like on a personal level to Tug, one of the most things I find the most aggravating is he really thinks his content is like, he really thinks it's good. Like, whenever I bring up like my Dirk video or my Bird video or my Kobe video or just even any other litany of the shorts that we make or whatever, like, he could never make anything like that. And he thinks that his content is so good. Like, all his content is just clipping out article or clipping out like interviews or sound bites and stuff and then just posting it, right? He doesn't even contribute anything. And like, even when he comes up with videos like this, it's nothing. Like, it's not even making any logical sense.
Jordan as the number one NBA player of all time. So if you haven't played that video, you may want to play that video first before you play all of this video. I made a lot of points in that video that I'm not going to make in this video. Okay, so let's get into this. I'm going to explain to you why it is ridiculous when Michael Jordan fans act like Bob Knight, Larry Bird, Jerry West, and Magic Johnson all pick Michael Jordan as the number one NBA player of all time. Here are the reasons why, in no particular order. First, when they act like Michael Jordan is the number one NBA player of all time because these four Hall of Famers pick him, they are disrespecting all of the Hall of Famers. Next.
No, see, this is what I mean. It is not a 1-0 binary. I just made a video going back over our debate about the 95 Rockets and 2011 Mavs. And it's like, just because I argue for the 2011 Mavericks doesn't mean I'm disrespecting the Rockets. It doesn't mean that I think Charles Barkley and Robinson and Stockton and Malone and the guys that the Rockets played were scrubs, right? To pick Jordan as the greatest is not to disrespect Jabbar or Tim Duncan or LeBron James or Kobe or whoever, right? This is what, like, he knows what he's doing. He's being disingenuous. He's being a weasel again. That's not what it means. That's how you're interpreting it, because you get so wound up if people pick Jordan that you have to attack them. He has to other Michael Jordan and Michael Jordan fans and just assume the worst about them so that he can feel as if he's morally right and logically right. But he's not. Like, because, look, I don't care. Like, I don't give a shit. It's just basketball, right? this is all just for fun and content and stuff like that. I mean, yes, my opinions are my opinions, right? But like, you know, if I pick Michael Jordan, it's not like a slight against Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, right? If we're just use them as an example, right? It's not like I think Jabbar is a scrub. It's not like I don't think like Jabbar doesn't have his place in the top 5 or 10 or 3 or whatever, right? It's not a disrespect. But again, it's like, if you're going to ask us and have us pick who the best player is, and we have to take somebody, like most people take Michael Jordan. It doesn't mean we're disrespecting anyone else.
They are dismissing all of the Hall of Famers.
Not dismissing anybody.
Next, when they claim to respect the game and then they disrespect all the Hall of Famers, they are contradicting themselves. Next, when
Okay, we do respect the game and we're not dissing other people. Like, this is, you know, it's, you know, I've come to the conclusion where I think Tug knows what he's doing, right? Like, this isn't just how he honestly thinks. He knows this isn't true.
they claim to love the game and then they dismiss all of the Hall of Famers,
We do love the game, and we're not dismissing other Hall of Famers.
they are contradicting themselves.
We're not contradicting ourselves. We can love the game and rank players. Is that okay with you, Sir Master Tug? Is it okay with you if we watch the game and study the game and look up statistics and rank people? Is that okay with you?
Next, Michael Jordan fans have a history of always trying to find a way to rank Michael Jordan as the number 1 NBA player.
What do you mean by find a way? Like, we have an opinion, right? We have our own opinion, and we all this is like the GOAT debate we had, right? People can use any number of metrics or any number of data points or whatever, right, or criteria to rank people, right? They're not finding a way, right? It's not like people have some like biased relationship towards Jordan and they're just trying to get some confirmation bias and make him number 1, right? They watch the game, they study the game, they look at stats, whether they be a former player or a manager or a coach or someone who played in college or high school or plays for fun, or is a total casual and watches 2 NBA games a year and just maybe reads ESPN headlines, right? They're not finding a way, right? They're not like reaching back and coming up with these absolute ludicrous reasons that don't make any logical sense. They just think Jordan is the best. That's it. There's no conspiracy theory to it.
Of all time. So that right there shows you that they're not reliable. Next, understand
Reliable. What does that even mean? People, if you have an opinion, you're not reliable. All right.
and why Michael Jordan fans are always saying that Bob Knight, Larry Bird, Jerry West, and Magic Johnson picked Michael Jordan as the number 1 NBA player of all time, and that proves that Michael Jordan is the number 1 NBA player.
It does not prove. Again, this is his silver bullet theory. That's what I'm going to start calling it every time he does this. If you bring up the 6 rings as to why Jordan is the greatest, it's a silver bullet theory to him. He thinks that you're simply providing one thing. You're just providing one thing, right? See my hand, one thing. You're just providing one thing, and then that's it. Debate over. No, it's not just these 4 guys, right? It's a ton of people, which I'm going to get into here in a little bit, the other video.
Of all time. It's because they're just trying to find a way to rank Michael Jordan as the number 1 NBA player of all
We're not finding a way.
time. So that right there shows you that they're not reliable.
He acts like big basketball is paying people to pick Michael Jordan. That's the best way. That is literally what Tug thinks in his head, right? He thinks there's like an agenda out there with big basketball to like they came by my house the other day and they're like, "Hey, you're in NB Sports. Hey man, here's $50. Make a Jordan video. Say he's the GOAT." And I looked around and I was like, "Oh, I gotta make sure Tug's not watching, right?" And I took the $50 and I was like, "All right, let me go pump out a Michael Jordan video and find a way to make him the GOAT."
Next, there are lots of non-Hall of Famers who don't pick Michael Jordan as the number 1 NBA player of all time. So why are
There's a lot of non-Hall of Famers. I mean, that's fine, right? Well, we're gonna get into this too. That's it's just a weird way you're going to start off with non-Hall of Famers. He must know that there's like some poll or something out there of Hall of Famers who say Michael Jordan's the GOAT, or else he wouldn't word it like that.
Michael Jordan fans focusing on these?
And again, that's fine. So because those people say that Michael Jordan isn't the GOAT, are you saying it's a silver bullet as to why he's not the GOAT? Like, do you know what I mean? You could turn it back on him. Also, there's obviously no one is going to agree 100% that Michael Jordan's the GOAT, right? The point, though, is that most people do, right? So as much as you want to bring up this subset of people say he's not the GOAT, or this subset, within that subset, more people think Jordan is the GOAT than not. I guarantee it.
For people. Next, there are lots of NBA Hall of Famers who don't pick Michael Jordan as the number one NBA player of all time. So why
There's lots, but not most.
are Michael Jordan fans focusing on these 4 Hall of Famers? Next, how do Michael Jordan
But you just admitted, see, like he's talking out of both sides of his mouth. So like, if he says there are a lot of Hall of Famers that don't think he's the GOAT, if he had proof, or if he could have said most Hall of Famers don't think he is the GOAT, then he would have said that, right? Meaning that most Hall of Famers do think Jordan is the GOAT, correct? So it just makes no sense, right? So in one breath he's saying, well, it's just these 4 guys, but he's also subtly admitting that it's not just those 4 guys, it's most Hall of Famers. It's most non-Hall of Famers.
Jordan fans explain that most NBA Hall of Famers, most NBA legends, most NBA scouts, and most NBA experts don't say that Michael Jordan is the number one NBA player of all time because Bob Knight, Larry Bird, Jerry West, and Magic Johnson say that Michael Jordan is the number one NBA player of all time. Next, how do Michael Jordan fans explain that most of the owners that Michael Jordan played for, and most of the general managers that Michael Jordan played for, and most of the coaches that Michael Jordan played for, and most of the players that Michael Jordan played with don't say that Michael Jordan is the number one NBA player
I doubt that.
of all time because Bob Knight, Larry Bird, Jerry West,
And by the way, that's like a subset of how many people? That's like 40 people, 50 people. You know what I mean? Like, and not only that, but I don't even believe that most of the players he played with, his teammates, don't pick him as the number one player of all time. I find that really hard to believe. I would love to see some proof on that. Again, you figure he could take like 5 minutes out and like post up the link or post up the quote, right, of people saying he's not the GOAT. And then in terms of like general managers and owners, I don't believe that either. Like, let's look. I don't know. Let's look. I don't know. I've been looking. I can't find anything. In terms of like owners or former managers saying that Jordan is not the greatest ever. And again, that's only like 8 to 10 people, right? And I would guarantee you it's not true what he's saying, right? If he had an article or something he could throw up, then he would have done it.
and Magic Johnson pick him as the number one NBA player of all time. Next, how do Michael Jordan fans explain that he doesn't say that he's the number one NBA player of all time?
It doesn't matter what Jordan says. It really is irrelevant if Jordan says that he's not the greatest, right? It doesn't matter. This is like when people write a book on like maybe some kind of statistics or something like that, and the statistics are what they are, right? They come out, they do their research, and it is what it is. And then the author or the person who found these statistics will give like their own interpretation of something, right? So like as an example, right, there will be some statistics on why people who do certain things become wealthier than others or something like that, right? Or just, whatever it may be. And the author will kind of give their own political and social opinion on it, right? And they'll be like, well, even though my data says this, the way I think that it happened was because of ABC. Their opinion in terms of like the stats, after the stats are out, right? Anything after that is just their opinion, correct? Don't get me wrong. Thank you for doing the research. Thank you for getting the data set. Thank you for, spending your time and doing this stuff. But as long as the research is sound, right? As long as it's, you can replicate their statistics or what have you, and there's no flaws in the study or whatever, and then they put it out and then they give their own like opinion on it of like why it is or why that. You're just now one person giving an opinion, right? It doesn't matter that you're the author or that you're the originator of the statistics or the study, right? We just want the numbers, right? Then after that, it doesn't really matter what you have to say in a way, if that makes sense, right? So because Jordan says he's not the greatest doesn't mean anything to us, right? It just doesn't.
Because Bob Knight.
And by the way, if people were such Michael Jordan fans, wouldn't they listen to him and be like, well, Michael Jordan said this, so I'm a Jordan sheep, so I agree with him. No, they don't do that.
Larry Bird, Jerry West, and Magic Johnson.
In fact, that's actually a good point. That means that Jordan fans are actually going against what Jordan says, meaning that they're not sheep. They're actually coming to these conclusions on their own.
Pick him as the number one NBA player of all time. Next, how come Michael Jordan fans don't do the same type of thing for other sports? Next, how come Michael Jordan...
What do you mean? Like, what do you mean? Picking a GOAT? Saying someone is the greatest? You really think that Michael Jordan fans don't have a greatest player in football or something in their opinion, or hockey or baseball? What the fuck did that even mean?
Jordan fans don't do the same type of thing for things that are outside of sports. Next.
Jordan fans, do you have a favorite food? Why do you pick that favorite food? Jordan fans, do you have a favorite car? Why do you pick that favorite car?
How come Michael Jordan fans don't do the same type of thing when it comes to who they rank as the number 2 NBA player of all time?
I bet they do. They probably look at stats, rankings, statistics. I already said that. Championships, accolades, achievements, who they beat, who they played against, who they played with, the era. I bet they do all of the exact same thing that they used to pick Jordan for like their top 5 or whatever. That was seriously dumb.
And the number 3 NBA player of all time, and the number 4 NBA player of all time, and so on. Next, if Michael Jordan fans are going to go by these 4 Hall of Famers, how do Michael Jordan fans explain that these 4 Hall of Famers probably don't agree with each
But you already admitted that there are tons of other Hall of Famers and non-Hall of Famers that also think Jordan is the GOAT. So it's not just them.
other on every topic that has to do with the NBA? Next, if Michael Jordan fans are
Because maybe they don't agree. Do you understand? This is what I mean. Where it's like, we're talking about Jordan being the greatest, right? We're not talking about other topics. So we're talking about Jordan. So we're trying to pull only statistical data that have to deal with Jordan being the GOAT or not, or other players or not, right? So if Bob Knight says, make him shoot from the corner, right? If you're going to give up a shot, make him shoot a corner 3, right? That has nothing to do with the Jordan topic, right? If Jerry West says, I'll take a shot blocker over a guy who can score, that has nothing to do with the Jordan topic. That's what I mean. Like, you might agree or disagree with them on other stuff. Because one person says something that you agree with doesn't mean you then have to agree with everything they say. Like, he can't be this dumb. Tug just cannot be this dumb. I refuse to believe it.
Are going to go by these 4 Hall of Famers, how do Michael Jordan fans explain that these 4 Hall of Famers probably don't agree with each other on every topic that has to do with sport?
Irrelevant. Totally irrelevant. Because Larry Bird and Bobby Knight don't agree on the best shooting form, right? Or the purest shooting form, doesn't then make their opinion about Jordan invalid. It's totally irrelevant.
Sports. Next, if Michael Jordan fans are going to go by these 4 Hall of Famers, how do Michael Jordan fans explain that these 4 Hall of Famers probably don't agree with each other on every topic that is outside of sports? Next, if Michael Jordan...
Oh my God, this is so stupid. I'm losing brain cells. Oh my God. Larry Bird and Bobby Knight don't agree on which is better, Lions or Tigers. So therefore, you can't take their opinion on Michael Jordan seriously.
Jordan fans are going to go by these 4 Hall of Famers, then if they want to be fair and if they want to be consistent, then they have to agree with every take that each of these Hall of Famers have when it comes to the NBA. Next.
No, you don't. We're talking about Michael Jordan versus other players. We are only going to pull data and opinions on that from other players, right? This is what I mean. Like, so if this is just so stupid, dude. If Larry Bird says the three-point shot is better than versus Bob Knight, who says working the ball into the post is better, like, so which one do you agree with, right? Well, I don't know. My head's gonna explode because they don't agree on other NBA takes, right? Like, this is so silly.
If Michael Jordan fans are going to go by these 4 Hall of Famers, then if they want to be fair and if they want to be consistent, then they have to agree with each Hall of Famer on every take they have on every topic that has to do with sports.
No, you don't.
Next, if Michael Jordan fans are going to go by these 4 Hall of Famers, then if they want to be fair and if they want to be consistent, then they have to agree with each of these Hall of Famers on every take they have on every topic that is outside of sports. Next, why are they going by these Hall of Famers when they can just go by Michael Jordan? Michael Jordan basically made the point that he is not the number 1 NBA player of all time, and he basically made the point that there is no such thing as the number 1 NBA player of all time.
Irrelevant. It doesn't matter what Jordan says. Again, like, this actually proves that Jordan fans are not sheep, right? Because if all they did was just agree with everything Jordan said or did, then when he said, well, there's no such thing as a number 1 player of all time, right? Well, then they would go, oh, Jordan said there's no number 1, so we'll drop it. But instead, they say Jordan is. They still say he's the greatest, right? Meaning they're thinking for themselves. I brought this up a little while ago. Again, Jordan's opinion on the matter weighs about as much as everyone else's, and it just so happens to be that most people think Jordan is the GOAT, right? This is getting into some really, really stupid territory. And again, Jordan essentially said, like, it's just hard because people from other eras didn't play each other, right? I would guarantee you, if you put a gun to Jordan's head and you, metaphorically, and you said that, Jordan, you got to pick who the greatest player ever was, or do you think you were the greatest player ever? He would absolutely say yes.
Next, if Bob Knight, Larry Bird, Jerry West, and Magic Johnson pick Michael Jordan as the number one NBA player of all time, it doesn't mean that they are reliable. Next.
That's not even really what we're doing here, right? And that's still just your opinion. So essentially, if anyone says Jordan is the greatest, they're not reliable. You're just showing how much you hate Jordan.
Just because Bob Knight, Larry Bird, Jerry West, and Magic Johnson pick Michael Jordan as the number one NBA player of all time, it doesn't mean that Michael Jordan is factually the number one NBA player of all time. Next.
Totally irrelevant.
If Bob Knight, Larry Bird, Jerry West...
It's a non sequitur, right? That has nothing to do with the whole thing about bringing them up and what they said about Michael Jordan.
Magic Johnson did not pick Michael Jordan as the number one NBA player of all time. Michael Jordan fans wouldn't agree with any of them, and Michael Jordan fans would tear all of them down. Next. Sometimes...
Do they tear everyone else down? Like, this is also the thing I don't get is, like, he thinks that if you're a Michael Jordan fan, right, and someone says LeBron's the best, I'm just gonna hate you now, right? Like, people can disagree, bro. It's all right. I think it's you who gets a little upset because Jordan fans are constantly calling into your show and proving you wrong. Michael Jordan fans don't get any more upset that you don't pick Jordan than LeBron fans get upset that you don't pick LeBron.
Sometimes people are just being nice. They're giving respect. They're giving credit and things like that. It doesn't necessarily mean that they pick Michael Jordan as the number one NBA player of all time. Next.
So then why do you care? Why are you so, like, you're so hell-bent on proving why this isn't correct? And then it's like, well, maybe they're just being nice. Pick one, bro.
If Michael Jordan fans are going to go by these four Hall of Famers, how do Michael Jordan fans explain that these four Hall of Famers don't say that because they pick Michael Jordan as the number one NBA player of all time, it means that it is a fact that Michael Jordan is the number one NBA player of all time? Next.
It's a non sequitur. It doesn't matter. We're just using it as an example, as a reference point amongst the many, many others.
I want you to think about...
And again, largely picking Jordan as the GOAT is an opinion, right? It is subjective. I've debated this before, right? I think that objectively there is a GOAT. Someone has to be the GOAT out there, right? Now, how we argue that, right? I think that objectively you can come to Michael Jordan being the GOAT. That's really the debate, right? But the thing is that in terms of this, right? In terms of this, if you, again, this goes back to the beginning of the video. If you were going to make the declarative statement that Jordan is not the number one NBA player, right? That means someone else must be the number one player. By your own words, by your own formation of the English language, someone else has to be number one. That is different than saying, I don't think a number one exists. I don't think it's possible to rank someone as the number one player, correct? That is different, right? That is a non-declarative statement where it's open-ended, correct? But when you say that someone is not the number one player, then someone is. Now we can start debating player versus player. And I think objectively, Jordan has the best record. I mean, that's what I would debate. That's what you're supposed to be debating, right? And you're going to have to put up someone else over Jordan for it not to be true that he's not the number one. So that's when when we're talking about what is fact or not, it's based on the way you are presenting the argument. You are presenting the argument that factually there is a number one or that someone else has to be a number one. That's the stance you're taking, right? So you then have to disprove Jordan's not number one. You can't then sidestep and backpedal and say, well, it doesn't factually mean there's a number one. That's a different argument. That's a totally different argument and stance to take.
Something logical. No other group of sports fans acts like one or more Hall of Famers in any sport picks a guy that they, the fans, like, and the Hall of Famer or the Hall of Famers pick him as the number one player of all time in that sport, and that proves that that player is the number one player of all time in that sport. Next.
Again, it's not the silver bullet. It is one data point in a whole litany of data points in terms of why people think Michael Jordan is the GOAT.
Next. It's not 100% for sure that Bob Knight, Larry Bird, Jerry West, and Magic Johnson picked Michael Jordan as the number one NBA player of all time. Now, Michael Jordan
Then what are you arguing against?
fans will say that it is known 100%.
Did they say it or not? Like, because you're taking a pretty hard stance that they said it, and you're trying to disprove why it doesn't count that they said it. And now you're saying, well, we don't even know if they said it. Well, then why do you care so much?
100% for sure that Bob Knight, Larry Bird, Jerry West, and Magic Johnson picked Michael Jordan as the number one NBA player of all time. Well, no, it is not known 100% for sure that Bob Knight, Larry Bird, Jerry West, and Magic Johnson picked Michael Jordan as the number one.
The best argument I can give, I didn't dive into what each of these players said, but I know that, like in Larry Bird's retirement, he essentially said that essentially Jordan or Magic Johnson is the greatest player ever, is essentially what he said, right? So, I mean, that's about as close as it gets. I'd have to go, and I'm pretty sure Magic Johnson has said it several times. I'm pretty sure Bob Knight, too. That's why he said that. But, yeah, like, either they said it or they didn't, and I'm pretty sure they said it, right? Or as close as you can get to saying it.
One NBA player of all time, and I plan on making a video for each person in the future. Next, if Bob Knight, Larry Bird, Jerry West, and Magic Johnson pick Michael Jordan as the number one NBA player of all time, they are all wrong, because there is no proof that Michael Jordan is the number one NBA player.
So again, this is what I mean where he's sidestepping and taking two angles here, right? Because they said it, you're right. It doesn't mean he's the best player, but no one's arguing that, right? It is an example. It is one of several examples. And I'm gonna get into the next video here in terms of why it matters, right? Why does it matter what people say? Well, because if we're gonna ask people, especially people who played against him, with him during his time, against other greats like Kobe and LeBron in the same era or the same time frame in their career, and they still pick Michael Jordan, they would have the best firsthand knowledge. They would know better than us. If you're going to, on one hand, use GMs and all this stuff and be like, well, a lot of guys said that MJ's not the greatest, right? And you're going to use that as some kind of fact or some kind of rebuttal, then obviously the other side of that is, well, more people, though, did say he's the greatest, right? So you're going to have to pick a lane. Either it matters or it doesn't. Let's get into the other video, right? Jimmy High Roller, one of my favorites. Shout out to Jimmy.
In life, very few things are guaranteed. Death, taxes, and the NBA GOAT debate. You can run, you can hide, but eventually, it'll always find its way back into your life. And as much as we think we know about the game, us mere mortal hoop fans have never seen greatness up close and personal like actual NBA players have. So who better to
Dude, Larry Bird was so fucking sick, dude. He was so nasty.
Ask about this age-old debate than the players themselves. From all-time greats to Hall of Famers to role players. If we ask the players themselves who they think the greatest player of all time is, who would they choose? Well, we have the answer, and it may not be what you expect.
So again, it's not just Jerry West, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Bob Knight. This is going to be a whole list of guys, right? Guys with firsthand knowledge.
Today's video is brought to you by Bet, same game. That's pro active NBA players. Sam Amick wrote an excellent piece on this poll. I highly recommend checking it out. And throughout this poll, these NBA players were asked to give their opinions on an array of topics, like who's the toughest player in the NBA, who talks the most trash, who's the best defensive player. For example, one of the questions in the poll was, who's the MVP? James Harden received the most votes from the players, but Giannis ended up taking home the award. Another question these players were asked was, what do you see as the biggest issue facing the league? 30% of players said officiating. But of the 16 questions that were asked in this poll, the question that had the largest discrepancy in votes was, who's the best player of all time?
So the largest discrepancy, right? In other words, you could say, well, all these opinions are kind of mishmashed on all these questions, right? But yet this one had the clearest answer of all of them.
Now, the best thing about anonymous polls is that players can be as open and as honest as they want to without worrying about being criticized for their answers later down the road. And, well, the players were brutally honest. In fifth place was a tie between Magic Johnson, Allen Iverson, and Kevin Durant, all receiving 1% of the votes. In fourth was Kareem. In third was Kobe. In second was LeBron with 11.9% of all votes. And in first, with a resounding 73% of the votes, was Michael Jordan. Granted, this poll was 3 seasons ago before LeBron won his 4th championship and 4th Finals MVP. But it seems like this debate isn't much of a debate at all. The experts had spoken, and the answer was clear as day. But I want to take...
Let me put it this way, right? Jordan has 6 rings and finals MVPs, right? LeBron winning his 4th ain't gonna change the poll that much.
A deeper look at these results. What if we removed the anonymity, peeled back the curtain, and saw how these players voted? Well, I searched. I scoured the internet for every opinion and take on the GOAT debate that I could find, specifically from NBA players. And along the way, I found some interesting things. Like this article from ESPN that says that Michael Jordan is better than LeBron in every way, according to NBA fans. And by every way, they mean literally every way. Like which one of them has the better shoes, who'd they rather have a drink with, and who has the better look. Riveting. Informative.
Dude, I would hate to have a drink with LeBron.
Petty even, but no use to us. I came across one video of Meta World Peace's take on the whole debate, and once you decipher his absolute dogshit handwriting, you'll see that he's got Oscar Robertson as his GOAT. He's also got Kobe and MJ taking up the same spot.
Oh my god, does that mean Oscar Robertson is the greatest ever? Oh my god, he said it. Oh my god. You know, like, no one else acts like Tug when it comes to, like, when people say MJ isn't the GOAT, right? It's fine. He can say the Big O is the GOAT. It's totally fine.
Not sure if that's how rankings work. And Kyrie Irving as the 4th best player in NBA history. I had no choice but to assume he was trolling, and so I moved on. Jason Williams gave his take on who he thinks the GOAT is and was ridiculed because of it on national television. Remember, kids, even NBA players can't share their takes about the NBA without getting crucified. Now, it was hard to determine the true answer for some players since over the years, they've changed their mind. At one point, Isaiah Thomas said Jordan was the GOAT, and then he said it was LeBron, and then he said it was Kareem, and then he said it was LeBron again. Originally, Scottie Pippen said MJ was the GOAT. Then, years later, said it was LeBron. Then MJ, and then he said it was Wilt Chamberlain, and then he said it was LeBron again. Unfortunately, some players refuse to give an answer on the debate at all, like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who's been around since basketball was played with a peach basket and has somehow never outright said who he thinks is the greatest player of all time. But after a long search, I collected the answers from 112 different NBA players. And before I show the results, let's see what we're working with. Here are the 112 players that gave definitive answers on who they think the GOAT is. Of these 112 players, 49 of them are currently in the NBA, and 64 of them are former players. If we break it down by decade,
A lot of Hall of Famers and non-Hall of Famers in there.
4 of the players that gave their opinion on the GOAT played in the 60s, 2 of them are from the 70s, 6 played in the 80s, 21 played in the 90s, 28 played in the 2000s, 23 played in the 2010s, and 30 are a part of this next era of NBA players. Now, of course, we're going to have some overlap in the timeline of players' careers, but for the sake of this experiment, this is how we're going to break it down. Don't like it? That's too bad. And before I reveal the results of this NBA survey, I want you all to make a prediction. In order, from 1 to 5, who do you think received the most GOAT votes among all players in this survey? Pause it here if you need to. Got your prediction? Well, here are the results of all 112 NBA players and their GOAT pick. LeBron, Jordan, LeBron, Jordan, Beach, 3 overwhelming 69 votes. Michael Jordan is unquestionably the greatest player of all time, according to NBA players.
Okay, Tug, so what does this mean, right? Do the opinions matter or not? And these guys apparently would know better than you or me, correct?
Now, if we compare these results to the anonymous player poll conducted by The Athletic back in 2019, the results are actually quite different. Michael Jordan still received the majority of the votes, but this time around, it isn't nearly as decisive as it was back in 2019. Keep in mind, the 2019 survey involved only active players, whereas our survey included the opinions of many retired players. But I think it would be accurate to say that over the last 3 seasons, LeBron has swayed more players into his corner with his title run in 2020 and his unprecedented longevity that now has him within reaching distance of Kareem's all-time scoring record. The only way LeBron even has a shot at being the GOAT in the eyes of most NBA players is through longevity, which has widely been agreed upon even by NBA fans over the last few years. But I want to point out some really interesting things that were revealed while gathering all these answers. Wilt Chamberlain and LeBron are the only players that chose themselves as the GOAT. In interviews over the years, Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan have hinted at the fact that they find themselves to be the GOAT, but they've never outright said it. But even
so I guess Tug was wrong. I guess, LeBron did. Jordan did hint at it, right? So
even more revealing is that time and time again, NBA players, the guys that know the game better than anyone else, choose Kobe Bryant as a top 3 player and in some cases the GOAT, while most fans don't even have him in their top 5. In fact, a lot of the guys who picked Jordan as their GOATs, like Kawhi, Durant, Jimmy Butler, James Harden, Vince Carter, and dozens more, actually had Kobe at number 2 and not LeBron, which speaks volumes as to what these players value and how they define greatness. I personally think that fans of the NBA tend to factor in in the totality of a player's career when considering where they rank all time, which only makes sense. Whereas NBA players put more value in the actual ability and capability of all-time greats.
Yeah, this is like the peak versus longevity argument, right? I care more about Jordan's peak than LeBron's longevity, right? How good were you at your best, right? That's what Jordan has in spades over everybody.
When ranking them, NBA players tend to see past narratives, situations, fortune, or misfortune, and rather assess these players based simply on how good they are at playing basketball. Now, I want to point something out. Most of the players that
I would have to say I think Kobe, as an overall player, defense, shooting, scoring ability, you know, you could say LeBron's a bit of a better passer, maybe a better rebounder. I think Kobe overall is a better basketball player than LeBron.
played against Jordan picked Jordan as their GOAT. But a lot of the players that played against LeBron also picked Jordan as their GOAT. In fact, if we look at the eras these players played in and how they voted, players across every decade chose Jordan as their GOAT. Whereas with LeBron, the vast majority of his votes came from players who may have simply been too young to watch Jordan play. This isn't to say they chose LeBron by default due to their age, but it is something worth considering. But what about the guys that played against or with LeBron, Kobe, and Michael Jordan throughout the course of their careers? Well, this is where things get really interesting, because out of the 112 players who were surveyed, 27 of them played against LeBron, Kobe, and Jordan during their NBA career. And of those 27 players, 1 of them said Kobe was the GOAT, 4 of them said LeBron was the GOAT, and 22 of them said MJ was the GOAT. Just think.
I don't know. Seems like an open and shut case to me. These people would know better than anybody. More than a GM, more than a coach.
About that for a moment. Among the guys that actually played against and guarded Kobe, LeBron, and Jordan, 81% of them say MJ was the greatest player. But we can take this even further. What about the guys that played with Michael Jordan and LeBron James? Well, among these 112 players, 27 of them were teammates of either LeBron or MJ. And of these
So look at that. Most are teammates of LeBron. Keep that in mind. Most played with LeBron and not Jordan.
27 players, 20 of them agreed MJ.
Dude, how do you overcome that? How do you overcome that? The fact that someone played with you, saw firsthand how great you were, and then just watched Jordan and were like, nah, Jordan was better. Dude, like, you have to be head and shoulders better than them for your teammate to be like, yeah, that other guy's better.
Was the GOAT, and only 6 said LeBron was the GOAT. And I think this might just...
And what did he say? He said a lot of Jordan's own teammates said that he wasn't. I mean... Rodman, I think B.J. Armstrong played with them as well. Steve Kerr. Of course, we all know why Scotty wouldn't. But yeah, look at these. Like he said, most of his teammates didn't pick him or some shit like that. I mean, here's 7 that do, and only 1 that doesn't, and we know why that 1 doesn't.
Just be the most revealing aspect of this entire experiment. The fundamental difference between some of the best players of all time, like Kareem, LeBron, Wilt, Magic, versus Michael Jordan, is that players respected these all-time greats, but they feared MJ. They appreciate LeBron and Magic and Kobe, but they revere Michael Jordan. Among all the interviews and articles I sifted through to gather the information for this video, it seemed like every time a player talked about Michael Jordan, whether they played with him, against him, watched him, they were all in amazement. Just talking about his game, you could see their eyes light up, like they were talking about some mythical being or something. They're all NBA players. They've all reached the pinnacle of their sport, and yet none of them see Michael Jordan as their peer, but rather above them, like he's on a tier of his own, this untouchable, unattainable, immortal status. The man retired from the NBA decades ago, and yet it still remains Michael Jordan, and then everyone else. Hope you all enjoyed, and as always,
I don't know, Tug. I think you're off base on this one. So yeah, that's my video. I just want to make some more content for you guys. So if y'all want to blow up Tug and see if he'll come debate me again, but he's just gonna get crushed. So I wouldn't blame him if he didn't want to. But yeah, that's my video. See you guys on the next one.